Session, the planning and zoning meeting. The meeting is held in person, but also via Zoom, and you can dial in at 719-359-4580 and use the web ID 863-8055-0264. And we'll have the roll call. Oh, do a roll call first, seat after. Correct?
It doesn't really matter, but
Oh, come on, let's do it by the book. I want to really badly.
yeah, do a roll call.
Roll call first, then we see.
See.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could just say your name for the record to help transcript. So sorry, we used to like say this out loud for you. but-
Oh, I make too much.
Okay. I thought he does.
No, why don't you just run them? Can you run the mic?
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay,
No, I meant turn him green. On your push the button.
I don't have any power. He's not giving me the power.
Okay.
We'll get you.
Okay.
Kyle Jones.
Patrick Corcoran.
Amy Connerton.
Joy White.
John Houghton.
Connie Guyman.
And is there a motion to seat Commissioner Jones?
I make a motion to seat Commissioner Jones.
I second that motion.
And we'll just do a call for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, welcome,
Wow.
Commissioner Jones.
Done.
This is your big moment. Okay, and is there a motion to receive the minutes from February 24th?
Yeah, I can make a motion to receive the minutes from February 24th, 2026. And I didn't see anything that needed to be changed.
Any second?
I'll second.
These guys weren't there probably, right?
I was there.
You were there.
Yeah,
Pat, you were there?
No, was not.
you have to have seen.
We still have a quorum though.
Yeah, I think some people choose that if they were not there to vote on that, but I don't think that's technically outlined in Robert's Rules of Orders that you cannot.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Call.
If you read them and you agree with them, you can.
Okay, so we had a motion. Oh, let's hear it. Do we have a second though?
2 seconds.
2 seconds? Okay, go ahead and.
I just want to make sure you guys are aware your edit notes were still visible in the version that's published.
Have you checked that recently?
He's corrected it.
Shucks. Okay.
What do you mean?
Certain, Commissioner? No, I'm just kidding.
What do you
Uh,
mean?
Thank
does it
you.
look like?
Thank you very much.
You can see his notes. on the
We did notice that.
Oh,
as
okay.
well.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay,
Just one note, I will say that that was a very scaled down version of minutes. I'm kind of taking the position, as long as our counselor is okay with that, that since we fully record these and post these meetings online, I really don't think that your minutes need to be detailed to
Maybe
the
talk to
degree.
council about that.
Do they prefer that?
We probably should have, we'll see how this goes. You probably
Something like
need to have a
that.
conversation at the council level about how detailed they are. Many of my councils still want the planning commission meetings minutes to be more detailed than their own.
Okay,
When-
I could see why.
Yeah.
because some people prefer to read them than maybe
Yeah,
listen
just
to the
when
whole.
when you're preparing for a hearing that you're looking back on the record, sometimes that's just easier than you can read faster than watching YouTube at triple
Great.
speed to see what the conversation was like. So that's kind of it.
I agree. Okay, do we have any comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda? It does not look like there's anyone online. And no one here in person. I'm scanning. I'm scanning. Okay.
Somebody right there at the bus stop.
Moving on to planning file numbers, CDA 27/2026 code amendment regarding section 7040-100 exterior lighting and section 7040-110 signs.
Okay, Emery Ellingson, Community Development. I'll be sharing my screen. Okay, so tonight is a code amendment. Specifically, what I'll be presenting on is section 7040-100 for exterior lighting and 7040-110 for signs. So again, the role of Planning and Zoning Commission in a code amendment is to make a recommendation for approval or denial to City Council. And so City Council would always make the final decision on any code amendment. But kind of the role of Planning and Zoning Commission is to review that, provide additional input on those proposed code amendments. And it's pretty limited. Again, it's 2 separate sections of code, but they are items that have a lot of commonalities. And we started this in January with a work session. And so kind of at that work session, gave an overview of lighting and sign code, and then came back with some recommendations from Planning and Zoning Commission. And so we've identified 3 specific things: color temperature, an illuminated sign curfew, and gas station canopy lighting, which I'll get into more. And then also included in the staff report was some comparisons. So how does our code line up with some other communities? And I specifically picked Town of Breckenridge, City of Flagstaff, City of Moab, and Nucla because they're, for one, they're relatively close to Glenwood Springs, and then they're actually also all officially dark sky certified communities, which again, that's basically a non-governmental organization that promotes lighting, responsible lighting policies. So again, those 4 were picked. You definitely have a variety in size. Nucla on one end with Flagstaff on the other. Glenwood would be in the middle. But you can see in the staff report how, even though those are really different communities, a lot of the policies do line up somewhat. So again, just to go into it, first thing was correlated color temperature. And what this means is how that light is perceived. And so you can have light be perceived as warm, neutral, cold. Again, that's how your eye perceives it. A lot of times indoor lighting, like at your house, it's going to be a warmer color. If you're in an office environment like here, it's going to be an actual cooler color. Now with that, when you have cooler light in general, that results in more of like a sky glow when you have it outside. That's definitely simplifying a lot of physics and how light works. But in general, cooler the light, the more you're going to have kind of that glow. And so when you see a lot of the regulations in these communities, and right now, Glenwood, we don't have any regulation on this correlated color temperature for lighting fixtures. So we don't regulate it at all. But what you'll see in these other communities is somewhere in the ballpark between 2,700 and 3,000, which is what Dark Sky recommends. And so again, you can see the range. And then what we're proposing is that and again, the way the town is split up, we split it up into lighting districts. We have 1, 2, and 3. And so the proposal is adding that to basically all fixtures need to be no more than 3,000 Kelvin per fixture. And so that's the unit of measure that's used to measure color temperature. And so this is the exact code language that is being recommended to be added. And then same thing in lighting districts 2 and 3. And then just a summary of that, lighting district 1 is commercial zoning districts, mixed use, so more of that intensive commercial use, everything in orange. And then lighting districts 2 and 3, yellow and blue, so that's more of the residential, also downtown areas. And so again, that would apply to everywhere on the map. So that's the first item, again, correlated color temperature. And then the second item is an illuminated signage curfew. And what this means is just that there's a time that you have to turn your illuminated sign off. So here are some examples. You have signs at night, and at some point, most businesses do close, and really you're not open for business anymore. So maybe there's not as much of a need to have that sign on. Now, currently in the city of Glenwood Springs, if you have an illuminated sign within 300 feet of a residential zoning district, you already need to be turning that off at 10 p.m. or 1 hour after close of business. So a business like, let's say you're a bar that's open till 2 a.m., a hotel that's open 24 hours, you're going to be able to keep your sign on more than maybe, an attorney office where you close at 5 or 6. So you can see here, so that's what the city already does to regulate. And then when you look at these other communities, they don't look at how close you are to a residential zoning district. It's just across the board. So one thing, about Glenwood's current regulation is that does, if you're a residential zoning district close to a business, maybe you have less light on your, in your daily life. But as far as how it affects citywide, you're going to miss out on having that collective effort to reduce some of that light pollution. So you can see different communities do it differently, but more or less they all have restrictions on when that lighting needs to turn off in different ways, anywhere between. So like Flagstaff in some parts of the city, they have it at 9 p.m. Then you see like Nuclear, they call it 11. So again, just having that idea. And then this right here is currently everywhere in yellow is areas of the city that are already within 300 feet of a residential zoning district. So those are areas that are already needing to turn their signs off when they're closed. So the areas that would be affected by this code change is everywhere that's not yellow. Because again, it would be moving that to be citywide. So here's the exact language. So illuminated signs shall be turned off no later than 10 p.m. or 1 hour after the close of business, whichever is later. And 10 p.m. was selected as a time because that's what we already have in code. So wasn't looking at changing that time, just to having it apply citywide. And then another thing to point out is that if these code changes are approved, what ends up happening is you have a situation where you have legal non-conforming signage. And so you would have a sign that was installed with a permit, all the regulations at that time of installation, but code has changed. And so a perfect example of this in the city is electronic message boards. They used to be allowed. And so then you see them at Culver's, Grease Monkey, a couple other places in town. Those signs are allowed to remain as they are. They were installed legally. But if there was any future replacement of the sign, change of the sign, they'd have to meet current code. So the example is, again, those signs exist. And same thing. So anything basically from the date that that code change is adopted going forward is how these changes would be applied. And so any existing sign would be held to that standard. But the idea is that over time, as signs get replaced, businesses change, you're going to see more of that standard be in the community. And then the third item is gas station canopy lighting. So this is an example too, when going back to that correlated color temperature, just with your eyes, you can kind of tell the difference in these 4 pictures and how that light, you can see some of it's like the Shell station looks a little warmer. One's in the bottom, it's a little cooler light. So one thing too, is you see wide variety too, and how these, each gas stations are lit. And so currently in the city of Glenwood Springs, as a reminder, how you measure light, the source, you usually measure with something called a lumen, and then a foot candle is measuring what that illumination looks like. So this is kind of a simple version of it. And in the city, we measure everything with a foot candle. And so essentially how many foot candles, this illumination under the canopy, how many foot candles you can have, how bright it can be. So right now, City of Glenwood Springs, we do have a minimum requirement of 5-foot candles for safety, and then a maximum of 25-foot candles. And then you can see other communities vary it. Moab doesn't actually have a requirement. They look at their lighting a little differently, like as far as the whole property. But just based on reviewing some of those other communities, we're just recommending a very small change, just reducing that number from 25 to 20-foot candles. Kind of fell in the middle. Some of these other communities, it wasn't as low as 15. But it's a little lower than it currently is, just with the idea that it's a small step to help reduce the amount of light pollution. So the criteria for text amendments to code, there's 5 criteria, and I'll go through each one. So the Planning and Zoning Commission, your role is to review this and make that recommendation based on how you think these proposed amendments align with those criteria. And so the first is just that it's consistent with a comprehensive plan. There's 3 specific goals in the comprehensive plan. So it's called out to reduce light pollution. There's another goal that talks about establishing and enforcing a citywide dark sky ordinance, and then also energy efficiency. So again, if lights are turned off, they're not consuming power. And then you also see that reflected in the 2024 Energy and Climate Action Plan. So the idea of kind of encouraging the reduction of energy use. And again, one thing too, just to point out, so dark sky ordinance, Dark Sky is an organization. They have lots of different designations, lots of different classifications. You could have a Dark Sky recognized code and not be an official community. So there's lots of different levels. You could have a code and ordinance that really aligns with a lot of their principles and not be an official certified community. So that term, I would say, is pretty broad. But the idea is you're following their principles of light, which is that it's useful, has a clear purpose, it's targeted. So that's the idea that it's, you have like a cutoff fixture, light's not spraying everywhere, adequate levels controlled. So these are their principles, which in a sense, that's what these changes are trying to follow. And then 2, it does not conflict with our other provisions of the code. And so these are already things that the code regulates. We already have a sign curfew just for those areas close to residential areas. We already regulate gas station illumination limits. And then really the correlated color temperature thing, that aligns with the intent of the section. It just wasn't included. And it really is best practice when you look at those other communities, other dark sky communities, that they're looking at color temperature as well. 3 is necessary to address a demonstrated community need. And so these are small steps to decrease light pollution. And then, the idea is that this is kind of coming from some concerns and conversations from the community. Also, Planning and Zoning Commission and the Council joint session came up. So these are conversations that are being had in the community. So these are attempts at kind of making some small steps towards addressing that issue. And then 4, necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions or policy. So the lack of the regulation of the correlated color temperature, that's something that, bringing us kind of on par with those other communities. And then it's just intended to respond, as the community grows, you have more lighting. And so having that balance of, you have growth in the community versus being able to see the night sky, that's what these are looking to address. And then just consistent with general purpose of the code, these are modifications of existing regulations. We're not adapting an entirely new section. We're not moving to regulate something that's never been regulated before. Signs and exterior lighting are both in code already. So again, suggested motion is recommend approval with the findings and conditions of the staff report. As always, if you have the alternative motion, you need to add your own findings. And then also an option 2 is to continue an item. And so these are all included in the staff report, and these would be the language for doing that. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, do we have any questions? He has not given me the power.
I have a question. So because Joy doesn't have the power, I guess I'll go first.
Go first.
So just a few things, Emery. So for the targeted, because you say it's targeted, right? So I'm guessing there was some differentiation, right, for areas with potential problems. So like nuisance lighting, lighting that contributes to safety, because some of the lighting does contribute to safety. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I'll see if I can. Well, actually, here, this picture is actually a great example. So that person has a light in front of their house. Obviously, you want to feel safe when you get home. There's no shield or anything on that light, so it's going up into the sky. So an example of what we have in code already is having that be shielded. So that would, wrap around, making the light go where you need to see it. Light 30 feet above your house doesn't probably help you as much as safety as light right in front of you.
So this would apply to someone who's doing something like that.
Correct. Yeah. So here's so like the existing code. Where are we? Oh. So right here. So this is already what we have. So in lighting districts 2 and 3, which are your residential areas, freestanding fixtures shall be cut off. So that refers to that shielding. Like we already have that. We're already requiring that. Now the hard part is we don't review electric permits. The state of Colorado does. So if someone wants to say, put in a light fixture on their garage and they're not building anything else, we're not necessarily going to review that. So that is a challenge to regulating this here in the city of Glenwood. But again, so then that would be right there, kind of controlling it where that light goes.
And you guys deal with those type of issues on a complaint basis, right?
Correct, yeah, like if your neighbor across the street installed, something like the light in that picture and a complaint was lodged, we would follow up and with, is it shielded, what's the lumen output? But yeah, generally we're not. Now, as part of a development package, we are getting lighting plans. We do review those. So when new construction comes in, this is all getting reviewed. But as far as like your day-to-day installation of light fixtures, not so much.
Can you just explain a little bit more about the sign thing, the legal non-conforming sign thing? In the event that this is approved tonight, what that would do for some of those signs?
Sure, and that it is going to create a situation where, let's say you have a sign right now, you have a business, and you have a illuminated sign, and you got a sign permit in 2005, and you've had it ever since, and you leave it on 24/7, even though your business closes at 5. Because you installed it at the time to code, you'd be allowed to continue that use. So it will create a situation where you're going to have basically a 0 date of signs from this point forward, can't do that. Signs any older than that are allowed to continue, just like the electric message boards. So like Frida's has that one, and other businesses, other restaurants would be, well, why can't I have that? Well, code doesn't allow that anymore. But as soon as, like, let's say that business sells, a different person wants to operate Frida's, they want to make the sign taller, they can't continue using that electric message board. So basically, if you installed it, if you got a permit for it, you're allowed to continue it and maintain it, but you can't make many changes to it. And then anything new going forward is going to be held to that. And then I would say, hopefully too, is, as businesses change, that's something that we can also catch with sign permits, because places do turn over.
So I'm being redundant, but you're saying even though you're not physically changing the sign by limiting the time, because they got that sign, it's a non-conforming use and they can continue to use it past the cutoff time.
Correct. And then I also think too, another good example is any sign that has been installed, if they were within this distance, they really shouldn't have their sign on in the first place. So that's another place where enforcement would also, you'd look at that. Like there's a lot of places in town that would already be held to that standard.
So really, like, none of the businesses over at the Meadows or
Target.
yeah,
I see
none of
Target.
that can be addressed, even though gosh, it seems like a limitation of use is so easy to.
Well, I just wanted to point out at the last meeting, excuse me, we heard concerns about how this might impact the business community. So we're trying to walk kind of a fine line of like, let's apply this going forward. But realistically, the impact that we already see is not going to be addressed by code. It's going to be addressed by really a public outreach campaign to try to encourage folks, to remind them that, hey, we all appreciate the night sky. This is what we can do to improve it. Let's turn off our lights at a certain time after our business hours. Some of that is already regulated by the code. We've tried to increase that to be any business that's within, sight or 300 feet of a residential unit, not only those residential zone districts, but then also for anything moving forward, we can actually regulate that without having, we could go across the board and say, hey, we're going to mandate that every business turn off their sign at, an hour after and go about enforcing that. But we heard concerns from you all last time about, how does the business community feel about that? And, we might need to do some outreach. So we said, we think this is a good middle ground to address it moving forward and then try to get compliance through outreach.
I don't remember saying that.
I do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there was some mixed, like you may not have said that, Commissioner, but I think there was some discussion around that in general about impacts. So I think that kind of got us where we're at a little bit.
Do you have a question?
I mean, I guess to be clear, is it we legally can't do it because it's a property rights issue, or is it generally applicable and we could do it, but staff is recommending we don't?
I think it's probably the latter. Yes.
I mean, I can tell you there was an amortization program in the city for signage that went very badly. before I came to work here.
Oh,
So I really would recommend that you try to gain compliance on this issue as more of a goodwill public outreach than telling businesses what to do
well,
with their existing signage.
and I think I'll also add to so to use town of Breckenridge as an example, they started in 2007 and they said they gave everybody 15 years to bring their signage up, or, lighting up to code and amortization projects similar to that. They got to now, and then they gave everybody an additional kind of an extension. So really you see two different ways to go about it. Either way, it's going to take a long time, because the way it's proposed now, you're only going to get the change on those existing signs when those businesses change, which is going to be, it's going to be slow. It's going to be incremental. And the same thing goes with, you have like, okay, if 15 years from now, everybody has to conform to this. Well, we're still talking 15 years from now. And even then, when you hit that final like deadline, you're still going to have people, you're going to have a conversation of, okay, well, what do we do? How do we enforce this? Do we continue that period? So either way, it's a slow process.
But you guys are also welcome to recommend to
Yes.
city council whatever
Yeah.
you think is appropriate,
So
just to be clear.
this was kind of picked it as a middle ground, just based on some of the comments, just kind of thinking of giving, the commission a place to start from, as with any code amendment proposal.
Next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any, I guess, input from public safety? I guess I grew up in a time when they wanted stuff lit for safety reasons, and I'm just curious if they have any say or input on this.
Not particularly, because again, some of this comes from, like, I would say the biggest thing here is the illuminated sign, which when you have a sign, there's no shielding, all that light goes straight up in the air. These signs are elevated 15, 20 feet. So this particular one, this isn't really security lighting.
No, I mean like in parking, like I was over in the Meadows and then I got out and it was like kind of dark.
Mhm.
And it doesn't bother me, but I have a wife and 3 daughters. So I'm like, so I'm just getting that kind of, I mean, I see the business side of it, but I also see public safety. And I guess the second question was, is it gonna cost more to build when we start building houses or new commercials? Is this more expensive, these kind of lighting? Or is it cost neutral,
Yeah.
what?
So for the first one, is none of these, really the only one that would affect, I guess, safety, if you're talking about maximum illumination, is the gas station canopy lighting. But one thing too about lighting is more is not always better. If we were standing here in a dark room and I shone a flashlight on all of your faces, you'd be blinded.
Yeah.
Versus if I had a lower flashlight pointed at the floor, everybody could see. And so that's, I'm simplifying that. But really the only code amendment here would be that maximum output of lighting. And then the second question, sorry, what was that?
And just the
Yeah.
cost of new construction goes to commercial or residential. I mean, is this cost neutral? Does it cost more to install these lights, warmer lights versus cold lights? I mean, I don't have any background in that.
Say about neutral, one way to think about it, a very simple way, is more lights is more expensive. So that's, if there's maximum limits you can't go beyond, people aren't going to be spending that amount. And then really a lot of it's just, usually, so for example, when we get a lighting plan, you'll see a lot of the specs and it's just like, here's this fixture and you can get it at 3000 Kelvin, 4000 Kelvin, or 5000 Kelvin, kind of take your pick. So in general, I would say it wouldn't have a huge cost, because we're not really, just more about what you're putting in and how bright that can be, what color it is. I guess a comparable thing would be like, I don't know, think of like a water line. Like you can pick lots of different types. You could have a PVC water line. You could have a copper water line, with advantages and disadvantages for either if you're building.
So if I was walking from town and had to go across the pedestrian bridge over toward the Hotel Colorado and then head down through West Glenwood, those lights aren't changing? Is that correct?
No, none of the parking, none
parking.
of the street lights, this is not being addressed, right? It's the canopy lighting for the gas station, it's signs, and then it's
Shielding.
limitation of use.
Correct.
Right, and shielding.
Those shielding is already in place.
Okay, good. Okay. I just wondering.
Just say stuff.
Like, yeah, well, because if you go to a gas station and you can't see because the lights are so dim, you have to break out your cell phone. So, but, yeah.
Can you explain again why, like if you were to have a curfew, why like the Meadows wouldn't have to participate in the curfew just because they built their buildings before today? And so,
So all of the existing signs would be allowed to remain. But as soon as a business would change, like Barnes and Nobles, that new sign would have to turn their light off 10 or 1 hour later than business.
kind of like how the other cities had like a 15-year, like you have 15 years to be able to figure out how you're gonna turn your sign off. So they have some sort of idea of something that's coming. I don't like the fact that they can just stand there forever and never turn their signs off. But I can understand not wanting to be like, tomorrow, you have to turn your signs off.
But you said that you all tried that previously,
Yeah, well, yeah.
or the
there-
city,
This
the
wouldn't do
city
it.
did.
Yes.
Yeah, they basically gave up on it.
Yeah, there was so much of an outcry from folks
Mhm.
being required to update their signage and lighting that they ended up, eliminating that requirement
But would you have to
or not enforcing it. Yeah.
would you have to update your signage just to turn it off after an hour after you close?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of it goes to, I mean, there were a number of things in that prior lighting ordinance around type and style of lighting that was acceptable. And so there were some businesses that it was going to be very impactful to and very expensive for. Just because of, so a good example is if, your system isn't really set up to automatically turn off your sign. Does that mean that you have to keep somebody there? Do you want to keep somebody? I mean, it was just those kinds of just the mechanics of actually making it happen. And, as you go through the ebbs and flows of economics ups and downs, as that was hitting at not a great economic time, the confluence of those two things was just not fantastic when you had a really struggling business community. And then you're telling them, well, I know you're really struggling and we're here to support you and you need to spend X thousands of dollars retrofitting your signs. That just didn't go over well with the business community, and there was a lot of pressure on the city council at the time.
I just feel like all they have to do is like flip the switch off when they leave. Just like, it's not that easy. Am I oversimplifying?
You may be slightly, depending on, I think, the types of signs and the types of, I don't know, right? I think the last time around, it wasn't just a curfew on the cutoff of the lighting time. It was the entire code being updated that you had to switch from an uplit sign to downlit signs. I mean, there were more changes that were, it wasn't just like, what time do you turn off the lights, right? It
Yeah, I
was
think-
more complicated than that version.
So-
A curfew would be.
I mean, we could make the recommendation to approve this with the recommendation that the city come up with a campaign to maybe educate the community on dark sky standards and
A timeline.
using the carrot versus the stick, trying to incentivize people to.
Yeah, you guys could make any recommendation. The world is your oyster on this one. So
I mean, not really. It's just recommended.
We recommend they go back to candles because I still don't understand the whole candle thing. Like, that's like an engineering phenomenon.
I just want to point out that folks have very strong feelings about their advertising signs
Oh, yeah.
based on experience.
So like,
Doing this for 25 years, other folks think, well, with the advent of the internet and how we all travel now and find things, a sign's not as important as it was 40 years ago. I believe that to be true, but I don't think that business owners feel that way.
if there's like is there exempt businesses from something like this? Like say the ER, right? It says emergency room. Yeah.
Another question. So if there's a curfew to turn them off by 10 o'clock at night or when they close, an hour after they close, is there some of the towns actually had a list of when you could turn them back on again? Like, can you just turn it back on at 4 o'clock in the morning or, when it's still dark outside or? saw one of the towns, I think it was Moab, said you can turn your light back on when you open your business.
Yeah.
I would say that's how we currently interpret it, likely, is that when you're open for business, you're allowed to have your sign.
Like the
That's not what it says.
You're open, you're
It
open.
just says. You
So
just
it's
turn
one
it
add
off.
additional.
They don't say when you can turn it back on again.
So like Nucleus says, it remains off until 1 hour before sunrise.
Yeah.
So do we need to add language?
For us to figure out.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. So yeah, you're right. Moab. All their businesses shall turn off illuminated signs 1 hour after business close and shall remain off until business opens. So you could add that to 5 shall be turned off at 10 p.m. or 1 hour after close of business, whichever is later. Signs shall be turned on. You know, you could use the same language.
So we have that line in there?
We
No.
don't,
No,
we would
that's-
need to add it
we need
as
to
a
add it.
recommendation.
So you take that. Oops. You know, language similar to that, 1 hour after business close and shall remain off until business open.
Yeah, because otherwise you could just turn it off and at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can just flip it all back on again.
Nobody's gonna turn them off anyway.
I don't
So
know.
it's like,
I can tell you they're all on at 5:30 in the morning. I'm not gonna make turn them off.
They're all hot night.
Like,
Emmer, can I ask a structural question, like the structure of the code? Would it make more sense to not duplicate our code in section in lighting district 1 and lighting districts 2 and 3 and just put it up in F with the general requirements?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when I can't remember who brought it up about street lighting, because we have a section in exterior lighting that specifically talks about street lighting. And, you know, if you don't include it there, it's not immediately clear. So I think, yeah, maybe it would be better to just do it as a general, all lighting fixtures that encapsulates your street lighting, 1, 2, 3. Actually, yeah, I think that would probably be better. So same, so he's talking about is instead of doing like, okay, you have this added here for this section of code, and then this added here for this section of code, just add it somewhere else as overarching, and then it covers everything. Just
Yeah.
more of a, just being concise and not duplicative.
And then for the around the 20-foot candles in the canopy, is there a reason not to go with the IES recommendation or standard? That's a publicly a public rulemaking body that comes up with these general standards and are generally the experts.
Honestly, I picked 20 because it was in the middle and thought it was a good spot to start for conversation. So yeah.
does adopting these standards make us a dark sky community?
Not,
I mean, I know there's no certification or anything like that.
no, so actually there is, you apply to
Oh.
them, it's a whole process,
the
you
whole
measure
thing.
your sky
Okay.
quality, you do a lighting audit, you show them your code. And so it wouldn't automatically like designate us as such, but it could put us, if the city wanted to pursue that in the future, these changes could put us on a better track to meeting some of that, so.
They like to take money for that certification.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, if we're achieving the same goal without paying. for it,
Correct,
if it's
correct.
important to us as a city, we could do it.
Any other questions? Any questions from,
He has none.
okay. All right.
We typically do that. We ask for questions from the.
Got it.
No, like, anybody else?
Comments,
check?
yes. that would be-
Comments. Okay, do we have a motion?
What- we just-
Officially open it up for public comment. Since it is a code amendment.
Do we have any public comments? No one online? Okay,
I actually have a question, Carl, could you just maybe clarify? So staff, we have the 3 like really specific, you know, code language here. If Planning and Zoning Commission wants to make a different recommendation or add something, does that need to be included in their motion? How does that work? Okay.
Yeah, if you're gonna make additional changes, I know that's a little hard to do, kind of on the fly, but it sounds like maybe some interest in cutoff and start time recommendations, something like that. I think it's relatively easy to do. If it's more complicated, we may want to continue the item and bring it back to draft that language if there's something beyond, kind of simple recommendations to make changes to the code.
I can make. We remember all the edits we had.
No, I gotta find, you can show me the sample motion. I can't find my.
So you have the motion.
I put the motion on there. I move to recommend approval of planning file CDA 0000027 2026 to city council incorporating the staff's findings with the addition of creating a curfew of 10 p.m. or an hour after closing to be, I gotta look at the language of the other cities, but to be for like a 15-year grace period to figure out how you're gonna do it. And add another addition about when to turn the lights back on when the business opens. And then the third addition is to request that the city have a campaign of education for citizens and businesses about the Night Sky Initiative. Ooh, you turned it so I can't finish.
Which one did you want?
I think you incorporating the additional staff. Because it meets the approval criteria. Because it meets the approval criteria.
Because it meets the approval criteria.
And we don't need to
Fine.
say anything about condensing that text. You already got that.
I
Yeah,
think we're okay.
Okay.
Second?
I'd second.
And any discussion?
I just really feel our businesses can figure out how to turn it off. I don't think having all this, trying to get the businesses to do cool lights and this lights and that lights, I could see that could cost a lot of money and be frustrating, but I think with education and support from their citizens, businesses can learn how to turn their lights off at night. And I do think it's just a light switch. Like you're closing and or a dimmer, I do think, but I do think giving, just like the other communities gave 15 years to figure it out will not make it so crushing to them.
And are we a different community than we were back when this was originally adopted? Maybe we're a little more progressive.
And also balancing, safety along with these guidelines. I
Well,
think
this
it's
is not, this is just business lights.
I think just in general, lights, just making sure we balance, safety because like, Commissioner Corcoran said, just as far as like if you walk around at night, those type of things. I think it's important. Regardless.
My 2 cents is that 15 years is almost too long of a runway. It's
long
gonna
time.
turn into a last 3 years project if it's 15 years. Picken County had 1 year, City of Aspen had 5 years. Both those were adopted last year. I know Glenwood Springs doesn't have the resources necessarily of either of those organizations. I just think anything longer than 3 to 5 years is probably just kicking the can down the road 10 years. I don't think we'll see any changes in the first 10 years.
Is that a proposed friendly amendment to the motion to?
An item
limit
for
it to 5
discussion
years?
before.
What's that?
I mean, I'm happy to propose that as a friendly amendment. I just don't know if my fellow commissioners
Got it.
concur.
I mean,
I feel like 5 years is reasonable.
I mean,
I agree.
Do you think
Because-
5 is too long?
I think 5 could be appropriate and would encourage the city to start the messaging sooner rather than later.
Mhm.
Now that the city would not start messaging immediately, but I just think it would fall to the back burner with a 15-year
Mhm.
runway.
We're gonna double down.
All right. Now are you offering it as a friendly amendment?
I am, yes.
Would you accept that?
Yeah.
Did the second accept that?
I would accept
Okay,
that.
there we go.
Let's do it.
5 years.
Okay. Are we ready to call a question?
Yes, voting is starting for approval of planning file CDA 00027 2026.
It's great.
Yeah, that's great. I'm
love
gonna have.
It's like the glitch,
Poltergeist.
glitching.
Needed the sensitivity warning.
Don't do it, don't do it.
Okay,
Are we supposed to?
We're making Trent's life easy.
yeah. You guys voted?
No, it's
No.
not letting us.
It's poltergeist.
I apologize. I don't think voting is going to work. It seems to be having an issue.
Uh-huh.
Do we do a vote by hands?
Yeah, just
Okay.
do
All in favor? Raise your hand.
I,
Aye.
And opposed? None.
thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Unanimous, it's great.
Good work, guys. Okay. Be here. Moving on to,
Now it's fun.
is it working now? Passed, okay. Okay, planning file CDA 26-2026, code amendment regarding section 70-40-50, landscaping, screening, and fencing. And we've got Mr. Hardcastle presenting.
Good evening. Give me just a moment if you would. It's nice to be following the as this is a set of proposed code changes also. Jim Hardcastle, Long Range Principal Planner, Community Development. And I'm here to present CDA 2626, a set of code changes to Municipal Code Section 70-40-50, landscaping, screening, and fencing. Let me see if I can't. Better not mess with this. I'm going to try to blow it up a little bit for you. As in the title, what we'll be talking about this evening is broken down into 3 sections: landscaping, screening, and fencing. And as typical with items in front of you, your role is to produce a recommendation to City Council this evening with an approval approval with conditions, or it could be tabled for your consideration at a later date. There we go. All of this is in your staff report, nothing new, but I wanted to put it all here in case we needed to reflect back on it. 3 sets of intent behind all of our changes. The first one are staff initiated based on clarifications, easy use, errors. Oftentimes we run across these whenever we're trying to work with an applicant, looking at policy and wanting to clean this up. The second one is the Senate Bill 2405. Basically, and they named it at the state level, prohibit landscaping practices for water conservation. It addresses the impacts of climate change, prohibits non-functional turf, artificial turf, invasive species for new and redevelopment projects, and it does not apply to existing projects and private residential lots. The idea there is that the impacts are more difficult to impart on a small development than it is on a larger one. Not saying that if you're small, you get away with it. But we also have other things like the turf buyback program and other encouragements to help people reduce their water usage in the first place. And that might imply that that's all we're doing. But no, a lot of folks will never come to us for a building permit or anything that requires any of the changes we're talking about tonight. So I think with this, they wanted to start in such a fashion that makes it effective in ways that are attainable at our level. The third reason for the changes this evening is a newly enacted Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. The fire department here at the city is putting it in place in whole, and you'll have heard about it. If not, you will. It is connected to changes and requirements within the building department. So the fire department will be working with building, but fire department reached out to us and asked us to work with our landscaping section and screening to make sure that we're helping to meet the ends for this statewide new code. It's not a revamped code at all, but it lends itself to supporting life and property regulations, mitigating the risk of wildfire spreading to and from structures. Adopting a critical response to increasing wildfire risk was the main tenet behind what it is that they're doing. And I'm sure you can recall a couple of these wildfires, especially in the middle of the winter on the Front Range a couple of years ago, which was a main driving factor here. And it's intended to help communities such as our own to maintain insurability of homes. I'm going to go through these very fast. They're in your staff report, but basically the first group here was primarily a way for staff to clean up and clarify the things that are required for 3 different exemption sections. They basically reflect and say, with your types of development, which are not large scale, then if you are single and 2 family, less than 5,000 square feet and less than 25% of a gross floor area, those 4 sections should apply to you only in C. 3 apply and not the water efficiency landscape standards. I'm only going this deep to let you know what it is that we're talking about. These are not new. The ones in red are new, that we're applying those to the sections down below, but they're not new to the code itself. Please stop me at any time if you'd like to, but if not, we can talk about it at the end. This second set talks about artificial turf and how it might be used, and we've applied the same type of rationale, the nexus to the idea of using artificial turf. They have called for it in SB 5 to be eliminated, but they are still supporting it to a degree for functional uses where needed. There's a plus and minus there. It reduces water, but it possibly introduces microplastics, and they're looking at everybody is looking at these more closely. But this is a way to do something that is more impacting at this time, and that's reducing water. Oh, excuse me. And the second one is the clear identification to applicants of the items that should be selected and should not be selected from certain guides. One of them is the city's Parks and Recreation Department landscaping species guide, and the other one is the county's noxious weed list. And that is also a determinant and moving factor from SB 5. This third one is found in our water efficiency landscape standards. We have broken it out into several hierarchical sections. That's mainly for better readability. The larger one in section 3 is directly related to the Wildfire Resiliency Code as cited there. And as it's amended over time, we will be able to accommodate for that. We won't have to reapply anything new that they come up with. Lots of edits here, and specifically pointing out drought tolerant, as the verbiage wasn't used initially the first time. It was vague on water efficient plant list, which we don't actually have. The third one is all brand new from the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. It's basically separating plants, putting no plants up against structures 5 feet away, and limiting and managing these living items as they grow and as they encroach on each other, maintaining that there is a distance back so as to lessen wildfire transmission. This was just a clarity to a document that we have on our city website, the Streetscape Manual. I'm in 3.5 years, we haven't really, that I've been here, we haven't really looked at it or needed it for any types of projects in the downtown core. And it mainly has to do with amenities, seating, trash, art, lighting, anything that might have to do with something that you would be wanting to put on your development, but and as the public access and use it, we have a standard within that manual, and that's what we're looking to strengthen the applicant's understanding of. This was just a clarification that's kind of crept up in the last couple of years with commercial businesses maintaining that if landscaping is to be put up against a refuse container enclosure, it should have that standard of permanency, opaque, or year-round screening at a mature height, maintaining that they don't just put in 12-inch plants to start off with. This is another clarification that we've looked at in the last couple of years where we've missed out on compliance a couple times because applicants and installers hadn't necessarily understood the difference between a roof, a side, and a ground mounted equipment, mechanical and utility equipment. So here we've just pointed out the difference and added exterior to roof and mechanical and utility, just simply stating that. And this last one is also in line with the state's wildfire resiliency code, maintaining that within 8 feet of a structure, there will be non-combustible or ignition resistant materials. This is clarifying that any vegetation is to be installed in the recession and not along the entire face of the wall. Spelling error. The criteria of code amendments, as we've discussed earlier this evening, are a list of 5. I have these broken down with anything you wanted to talk about here, but simply there is compliance and support for the comprehensive plan and the ECAP. The ECAP is more of a document that helps guide the city in what we do internally with energy consumption and savings, but this does support that. The second one indicates that it is not in conflict with any other provisions in the municipal code, and that is indeed true. There are 7 items here, which are the purpose and clearly stated from the landscaping, fencing, and retaining wall code section 5040. And those are all met. This set of amendments this evening are brought to you in an effort to support needed change within not only our code, but within the climate of building and adaptability, and it is necessary to support those changes, and it is consistent with the general purpose and intent of this code and the ECAP and the comp plan. It was publicly noted, this was brought to you by the city, no other outside applicant. Public notice was made on the 13th and the 20th. No public comment has been received to date. As I mentioned, your choices this evening are approval with conditions, denial, or continuing the hearing. Staff does recommend for approval of this set of changes found within with your authority to 70, 60, 40, within 70, 40, 50. Sorry, threw that all together. Therefore, we recommend approval as outlined in the suggested motion as follows. There are your 5 suggested findings again, and then if you find differently, we have alternative motions for you. With that, happy to take any questions.
Yeah. I got a question. It's on page 4. Yep. Yeah, on page 4
of the staff report.
Yeah, location of required plant material. Subsection 2, the pruning of trees.
Would that be this one? Yes?
Yep. Am I reading that where the city's gonna start requiring people to maintain their trees?
I think it would be, and whoa, sorry, stop
Sure.
touching it.
No,
No, I believe it is a recommendation from the state in response to a need to help prevent wildfire. We won't be policing it, but it is a requirement. I think it leads to helping solve problems where you find encroachment within a property or from one property to another, where a landowner, a business, a residential use might find more support and help within the code in encouraging, in not only in cleaning up their own property, especially if you have a renter, but if you're trying to encourage a neighbor to reduce some of that growth.
yeah. No, I just, if someone's ever tried hiring or costing a tree company,
It's impossible.
it's ridiculously expensive. But
New
I mean,
business venture for you.
you know, the neighborhood I live in, all the trees are old and everybody's trees are overgrowing each other's neighbors. And I had a neighbor without permission, but the tree trimming guys came and talked to me, asked if they could trim the tree because there was Chinese elm overgrowing their property. And it's been there. The guys planted it when they built the house. But at the time I was like, I don't have any money. I didn't have $4,000 or $5,000 to come up with to have the tree trimmed. So the neighbor, the second homeowner, he paid for it, and did it. But that seems kind of expensive to put on homeowners. I mean, there's a lot of old trees in the town that are overgrowing everything.
So is it my understanding that these don't go into effect when you like request a permit or have new construction that, or it's not something that is just like we have non-conforming use when we are not applying for those things, so we're not required to conform with that? Is that right?
So the applicability of the code has a lot to do with building permits, development permits, things that would encourage us to, look at those.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I don't think any of these regulations are intended to apply to existing private residences or any existing commercial businesses. The intent of that specific regulation there, I could see how it might be interpreted to show that you maintain that. But when we're looking at a landscaping plan, it would be if you have X number of required trees on your property, that we can understand that tree at maturity is going to have, let's just say, a 30-foot drip line. So we're not going to plant multiple trees next to each other within 30 feet or whatever that maturity is, so that we can evaluate that in the landscaping plan.
Okay.
So no, it doesn't.
It definitely doesn't. I mean, because if your neighbor calls you, the code department, and says, Patrick's tree's leaning over my fence, he needs to trim it, is that gonna make?
Except in those instances of the applicability section that we looked at previously. And we could pull that back up. So if it was a major addition on a commercial residence, what were the other ones there? That's the main one I see the applicability.
Where'd you go? Sorry.
So these would be the only, I think it was back to the last one. Yep. These would be the instances where we're applying this. So for single and two-family residential land uses, it would only be streetscape requirements that we'd be looking at there. Fence standards as well as retaining wall standards that apply to that. Less than 5,000 square feet, again, looking at the same sections. So the specific section that we talked about with the pruning of the trees, I don't think is in those applicability sections.
Is the city responsibility for any of these trees along the street? Is it all private property?
Most of those, even within private property, are maintained by the property owners. Kind of like
City
your
doesn't-
sidewalk when it snows.
The city doesn't hire tree trimmers once a summer to come through and clean up trees.
We do have
You
to
do?
replace some dangerous, diseased, or damaged trees and trim those, especially if they're, have implications for utilities in that area.
The street.
Yeah. Situation existing right now is along Center Drive. I don't know if it is cottonwoods or what the species is there, but the city's actually going in with our water line replacement project, removing those trees that are negatively impacting the sidewalk in that area and replacing them with more suitable, appropriate species. So in some instances, we do. That's not necessarily the responsibility of the property owners that didn't plant those trees. We're trying to protect our own infrastructure by removing
Yeah.
them and replacing them
I mean, the
with
power line.
more
companies,
suitable.
They do the same. They have the right of way to go down and clear stuff for the power lines.
I feel like I've also seen resources that Glenwood Springs has for homeowners who can apply for like help with that stuff if you meet certain criteria.
We run different programs at different times. Also with mitigation, biggest part of some of the tree pruning and spacing. There's a great benefit of having the fire department to come out and to tell you some of the areas of your property that are most susceptible to fire approaching from, different areas and or any hardening of your structure that they may recommend.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that we had Mina from the fire department come out and look at our house, and we applied for some. They have like some grants that match your input to help lessen the costs for you.
There questions? Any public comment? Seeing none online, we will bring it back to the commission for a vote. Does anyone,
Or motion?
yep, motion?
I'll do it, but you have to change it back to the motion slide. I move to recommend approval of planning file CDA 000026-2026 to city council, incorporating staff's findings because the application meets the approval criteria for code amendment with the amendment. I would also recommend striking from table 40.6 street trees, other standards. D, trees shall be spaced 30 feet apart on center unless alternative spacing is approved by the director.
Wait, can we pull that up? I don't know what we're talking about here.
Sorry, where are we at?
I was worried it's too much of a discussion item to talk about earlier.
It's okay, we weren't supposed to talk about it. Supposed to ask questions.
Table 40.6. Street trees, the street trees section of that table.
Bring up the code.
While he's doing that, it may be worthwhile if somebody is inclined to second, at least for discussion purposes, to just.
Get the dialogue going.
I'll second the motion.
All right, my explanation, I know it came out of the blue. The resiliency code requires 10 feet between mature crowns. Many of the street trees from the city's street trees list have crown diameters of 40 feet or more. So if we're recommending 30 feet, it's in conflict with the CWRC requirement of 10 feet between mature crowns.
Smarty pants.
No.
Hate it when things make sense.
Well done.
One, I'm surprised that the consultant that we worked with on that didn't find that one. Well, we didn't hire them, but we did have an evaluation of our code against Senate Bill 5 to provide recommendations. But I mean, it's absolutely true. If you're 35 foot off center and your mature crown is 40 feet, it's an issue.
Is Blue Trent's mine.
It's actually, it bleeds over to the next, it's D in the other standards category. Trees shall be spaced 30 feet apart on center.
Right there, right?
Yeah.
The. Mhm.
I mean, I guess they could always come to you, Trent, and you can always approve it. It feels silly to have a requirement that basically can't be met.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe the reason that wasn't flagged is because, they're mostly concerned with conifers, right, as opposed to deciduous trees. But that might be something I want to seek some clarification on. And most of our street tree species are deciduous trees.
So do we amend the motion to state that you look into it? Or
Yeah,
do we want,
sure.
right? It's your motion.
I'll
Up
amend
to
to
you guys.
recommend staff analyze it and bring
Yeah, there you go.
recommendations to council.
Perfect. And does the second, are you good with that?
Yes.
Perfect.
Sorry, and had you directly stated a purpose with that for us to look into
Yes.
that you're, okay.
You don't come up with some new draft language before council reviews it.
Okay, we're ready to vote. Oh,
So you can have discussion.
I mean, I think we discussed
Somebody
it.
else is like, we're done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody.
We don't like fires. Be careful.
Sorry. Oh, mine doesn't have a voting thing. I'm a yes.
Okay. Yes.
You get a vote.
My screen's just not working. Yes, so it's fine. Okay, the motion passes. All right, do we have any commissioner comments?
I'm good.
I do.
Go for it.
I was wondering for short-term rentals, is there anybody in the city that like randomly audits who posts short-term rentals on one of like the two major websites? Because I know that there's like 3 or 4 per block downtown online. It's on some blocks. So it feels like there's a rule, but nobody really enforces it.
We most certainly do. We were actually recently going through one of those audits, and we'll send out a notice of violation to anyone that we find that is not complying with the standards. But that's usually our course of action, is to evaluate those two major platforms.
And isn't it correct
And
that,
if you have some that are of question, please send those to us. We'll be happy to look at
One
it.
of them like doesn't look like it's right next door because on the map, it looks further away, but on the picture, it's like literally 2 houses away from another short-term rental.
isn't it correct that if it was a short-term rental before the buffer zones were put into place, it could still exist as one that's right next door to another one?
That's correct. That legal non-conforming kind of conversation we had earlier would apply to those that were existing before some of our more strict regulations.
So that would be the.
Is there a list of these, of the permitted
look.
short-term rental?
Yeah, I think that is actually on our website, on our GIS, one of our landing pages for GIS. You can see which ones are permitted.
And
But
who
again-
collects the like taxes from them when they have to, for lodging taxes? How do you make sure that they're enforcing paying the taxes?
Each one of those business operators has a business license and a tax collection license. And so they remit taxes to our finance department.
But does anybody check to see if they're remitting the appropriate amount of taxes?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, some of that is remitted from the actual platform agencies themselves. So it's pretty straightforward in those situations.
And then additionally, the finance department does regular audits across all of the various funds that they collect taxes for. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. It doesn't mean that every person gets audited every year.
Yeah.
But it does mean, much like, anything else, they try to rotate through, randomly select as well as complaint driven.
And I was going to mention during my comments, you may be hearing an appeal from a property owner on one of those in the coming months. So based on a decision that we made in regards to tax remittance.
Nice. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I just want to say thanks to staff and that landscaping guide. I did come across it when preparing for this meeting, and it's an amazing resource. It'd be great if they could add the ignition resistant category to the drought tolerant street trees.
What is that?
That's a requirement in this wildfire resiliency
Wildfire
code.
resistant thing.
You can
What is
plant,
ignition resistant?
it's a category of planting determined by the Colorado State Forest Service.
It's like an aloe.
It basically kind of identifies those that are high in oils like evergreens. and
Oh, I see. Like
have a
they
higher
won't
index.
ignite because they are,
But
Succulents have a low.
got it. Okay.
Specifically things that are allowed in those first 5 feet. So if the city has
That'd be
that
great.
resource already, if they can add that layer to it, I think that would be.
Yeah, helpful because not everybody just wants nothing or, yeah.
I think they're gonna
That's
hire
smart.
John soon, and then we're not gonna.
They
have
can't
city
because
council.
he's got Picken County housing. He'll never leave. He'll never leave
Yeah.
Picken. I just wanted to say that I have seen, just like on the swap and then in town, people utilizing that turf buyback program, and that's really encouraging to see. Yeah. That's all I have. Director comments?
I just wanted to publicly acknowledge Gregory Cowan and his service on this board, and to all of you, thanks for doing what you do. It's not always an easy job. Sometimes it's fun. We get to discuss kind of future policy and code like we did tonight. And you are beneficial. I think maybe sometimes you feel like you're put into a box and you have to make decisions based on the code and maybe don't get to express your feelings about it. But when we are looking at code revisions is when we do get to kind of, talk about the policy and where we want to go. And tonight, I think you had some great ideas and we're grateful for that. And then also, maybe where staff's a little more reluctant to be a little more advanced or progressive in some of our regulations, you might be that kind of the juice that we need to move that stuff along. So thank you very much. But yeah, future applications upcoming, potentially concerns about an SUP in town, special use permit, as well as that appeal that we mentioned. And then probably moving forward in May, maybe some additional code considerations. The benefit of us not having a ton of development permits at the moment means that we do get to do some planning and look at the code and maybe make some of those changes that we have talked about or anticipating for future, improvements in the city. So thank you.
Is the city contemplating water restrictions at all this summer?
The city continuously operates under a watering schedule, and we will continue to do that for this coming summer. There may be a need for some stricter compliance or enforcement in this summer, but we have a pretty good measure of a similar year, and that was 2018. We're a little bit below those levels. But the city is anticipating being able to provide the water needs of the city this coming summer, even in a tough drought year.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.